Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Hey, Tom.
So we've got Tom from What the Fi, or also known as What the Fi Guy, on. And Tom is someone who we have followed on Instagram, I think from the very beginning of when he started, or pretty close to it. And I've had a lot of opportunities to chat with him on Instagram, gotten inspired by a lot of the content that he posts, and heard his story. And it's a really powerful story that I think so many people can either relate to where he was, where he came from, and kind of some of the wake-up calls that he'll share that he's had. And I'm excited for him to share that story with people today, because I do think there's a lot that people could relate to. There's a lot of inspiration to come from it. So, Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. And you guys have been an inspiration for me and so many others that I'm just flattered to be on and share some of what I know and talk to you guys finally.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome. Kind of you to say.
So, Tom, thank you very much for being on the show. Let's start with telling our listeners a little bit about yourself. Who is Tom and what is the Fi Guy?
Okay, so I'm from Chicagoland area, and I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for over 25 years in a middle school, Chicago public school. And I fell into teaching after I went to college. I didn't know really what to do. I grew up in a middle class household where it was, we didn't really talk about money. We struggled at some points, but we generally had a happy life. And when we got to college, it was, you'll figure it out. There wasn't any guidance in terms of, what's the career path you should take. And when I was in college, I just kind of figured, hey, I've got a whole bunch of family members who are in education. Summer's off sounds awesome. And I'll just do that. And then I'm sure I'll enjoy it. I like working with kids. I like talking. So all that just combined to me being a teacher. And I was happy for a long time. And as I went around, as I grew through the profession, I realized that most of what I was earning, I wasn't really paying attention to. So with my first year with teaching, I remember sitting down with a guy who came in and said, "Hey, here's a 403B plan." I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, it'll take care of you, but you just put money in there. By the time you're done teaching, you'll be a millionaire." No plan, nothing else. Just kind of left it there. And I thought I was set. I didn't have to worry about money anymore. So I put my, I think, $75 a month into it and forgot about it a while, and then just kept working. And while I was working, I was focused on students and the profession. I never really put money aside. I noticed that when I was single and having fun and going out downtown, that I was racking up some high credit card bills. I think the highest I ever got was about $20,000 in debt. And I would just kind of throw it on my mortgage and figure it out later. And then eventually, when I got married, I had settled most of my debt, and my wife was pretty good about money. We don't really go out spend too much, and we try to pay off our bills. But I made a promise to her that she'd be safe and I would take care of her, and money wasn't a real problem for us. And I think about 10 years in, after kids and my wife had to stop working at her job to take care of the kids, we started noticing that I was falling in those same old habits. We were racking up credit card bills. We didn't have anything in savings. We were living paycheck to paycheck. We were watching other people go on trips, vacations, and we were trying to keep up with that by leasing cars and and throwing money. Every time we got a raise, we would throw more money into things we could buy. And and that's where one day I just got fed up and decided I need to figure out a better way.
It's so interesting to hear your story and background. And I obviously, had heard that before, Tom, but that's what I mean by I think it is just so relatable, because I think there are so many people out there who, are just living their lives and they're making, anywhere from good enough money to decent money to good money, and they're spending it all, right? Which we'll talk more about in a bit. One thing I'm curious to know, and you made a brief reference to it a second ago, but we always like to ask people how they grew up financially and like what their parents taught them about money or didn't teach you about money, and kind of what foundations did you have growing up?
So my father was a police officer, and my mom kind of worked part-time until she eventually worked in university. We didn't really talk about money. We just kind of, whenever, we couldn't afford something, the answer was a standard, we can't afford that. And it was just off the table. We wouldn't talk about it anymore. And we didn't talk about investing. We didn't talk about, how money works and money working for you. And I don't blame my parents for that. I just think like I definitely wanted to make sure, just to fast forward, that my kids have a better foundation of how it's going to work with them as soon as they enter the job world. And I don't think I had an idea, and it took me, part of my story, why people can relate to it. It did take me a long time into my middle 40s, I want to say, before I realized how money works. But yeah, my background was just middle class, and we got by with what we had. We lived in a small house with 3 kids, and we didn't go on family vacations. We didn't do too much. We didn't go out too much, but we enjoyed life. But money wasn't really talked about that much. And even if we did talk about it, I remember growing up when I was choosing my what I want to do for college, one of the only lessons I got was, find a job with a good pension, it'll take care of you. And that's where kind of teaching, I checked it off the list, said, well, that pension will take care of me.
So one of the things you touched on in your story a little bit ago was when you and your wife were getting raises, you were constantly like putting that towards other expenses. And you use the term on your blog, lifestyle creep, which is a favorite of me and Maggie. As you were going through that lifestyle creep, were you two aware of it? And like, at what point did you realize how far you were in and decide to make a change?
That's a really good question, because I like to think now, as I reflect back, and we were aware of the pain of not being able to keep up, of not getting the same things as we saw as our friends and maybe family members were that earned higher income. And we were aware of the embarrassment for when we would fall into debt. I think one of the first times that I was really aware that we were falling into trouble was we as teachers were given a salary and then left to manage it during the summer. Well, I never had a problem with that until one year I realized we didn't have enough money to make it through the summer. And there was no reason for that. It just took a little bit of budgeting. And I think we fell into the same traps that a lot of couples fall into, where instead of figuring it out, we started finger pointing and, saying, what are you buying this for? And what happened to our money? And I think it's because, you wanted that car or something like that. And we realized, we don't need to do this at some point. We need to figure out a plan. And that was one of the first things. The major turning point was I realized that I was getting really miserable, and I didn't understand why. And I just chalked it up to, this is a midlife crisis. I've heard about this before. I just really want to retire, but what's retirement going to look like? Are we going to be struggling then? And what it came down to was control. We had very little control of our finances, and therefore we were just counting on these raises at the school. If you know how a school teacher gets paid, it's very structured. You know what you're going to get. And yet the lifestyle creep was killing us, and we could not pinpoint it because we didn't have a budget. We didn't have an awareness of how money works. We didn't realize that we were definitely following the Joneses wherever we could. We were leasing cars and living beyond our means and going out as much as we could. And the time where I remember vividly, we were driving to Florida to see her parents because we couldn't afford a plane trip. And it's just my wife and I and the 3 kids and a dog all jammed in a car. It's not unusual. A lot of people do that. But we were coming back, and I have back issues, and I knew I was in a lot of pain, and I was upset, like, why do we have to go through this? Why can't we afford a flight? And we were getting a little bit of an argument. And when we got back, my wife is definitely more rational than I am and calm. And she said, we need to find you something that you're interested in. And you lately have been talking a lot about how we don't have money, and you always were interested in real estate. And so she gave me some podcasts, gave me some YouTube videos, and where I learned about how people just like me can invest in real estate. We jumped far too early. I got really excited about it, and we bought a rental. And I was just amazed at how well it worked out. Now, knock on wood, we understand this can go south, but we bought a rental. We have a great tenant that's paid on time. And I was just thinking, this can't be, why didn't we do this before? And then I started learning about, I can't buy 20 rentals right now. I don't have the capital for it. Where else can I invest my money? So I read every book I could about investing. And over again, I kept hearing the same things about index fund investing. And I looked at my 403B plan, which was just rife with fees and annuities and garbage. And I changed that. And then I realized I have to invest more than I am. We decided to learn about zero-based budgeting. And we soon just attacked our budget with a vengeance and cut everything that we didn't value and we didn't need. And we just, from there, within 3 years, we went from about $300 every week left over in our checking account to, last I checked with that, we have now 43,000 liquid in emergency funds, sinking funds, and our net worth is dramatically increased. We paid off nearly all of our debt except for our mortgages, which we have a 5-year plan to try and attack. So we're moving in the right direction. I feel more control in my life, and I also feel a lot happier because of it.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And again, that's what I say is so inspiring about your story and kind of, where you've been able to come from and to, and how much progress you've made in a reasonably short amount of time. So I have a bunch of questions to just kind of unpack some of the things you just shared. One super quick question. How old I know you have 3 kids. How old were your 3 kids when you had this like aha turning point, and when you were realizing you were so unhappy?
Yeah, my kids were, I had them a little bit later. My wife is much younger than me, but my kids were about 4 to 7 years old.
Okay. That's why I was wondering, because when you were first talking about how you were, a bit miserable and you didn't know why, I was thinking, look, there's a lot of people who, when their kids are young, that's a tough stage. And having, 3 young kids, it's hard to separate what is, from that. Not that kids aren't lovely, and, we love our children,
kids, just for the record.
But it can be exhausting, right? And it can be a tough part of a tough stage of life, particularly when they're very young. So I was more just curious how old they were then.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that, because I could see part of where my wife knew, like, not to dive too far into it, but said you're not happy when you're around them as much as you used to be. And it had nothing to do with them. It just said, it had to do with everything combined. Now, I wouldn't say nothing to do with them, but like you said, it's stressful. But to add on to the stress with the financial problems and everything else, it adds up.
Yeah. So one of the things you just talked about, and that you've talked about a bit on your blog, is just, the difficulty in your relationship, and a bit of like bickering with your wife and stuff, and realizing that money was at the source of it, and just feeling that lack of control. How do you, since you've gotten things in order, how do you feel like things have evolved with your relationship now that your finances are in order and you've really made this 180?
Yeah, and I don't want to start. I know my wife's going to listen and say it wasn't that bad, but
why didn't you? By the way, you didn't say it was that bad, but you just said like some bickering, right? Some like
yeah. We've always had a very healthy, great relationship, we knew like we were arguing about things that we never argued before, and that has gotten so much better, and especially because I've been able to bring her on board. She doesn't like to read all the finance books. She is a health fitness instructor, and she reads everything on earth. That's a passion and that she reads and learns about. And she teaches me how to be healthy and eat healthy. And I teach her all about finance. And we've been able to bridge those commonalities, and we're able to set goals, both with our health and with finance, that we can get on board. For example, I found out like she's really into real estate too. She's more into listening to podcasts about real estate than about index fund investing. She finds all that incredibly boring. And so she just lets me handle it. But we've been able to set goals that the both of us can get on board with that we never were setting before. And simple things like I would advise to any people that are getting married, especially, to have joint accounts that are transparent and you can see. Because simple things like that, I mean, if you can't see it, you just naturally start assuming that, someone's making frivolous charges to things that really are like groceries, the things you need. And instead of bickering about little things like that, we're on board now by setting budgets and sticking to them. And it's just a much healthier relationship once you can get on board with that.
So on the topic of budgets and working with your spouse, which can be extremely challenging, I think, for everybody, what were some examples of things that you guys agreed to cut from your expenses that led you to, $300 left a month to now this huge emergency fund?
Oh,
gosh. So where do I start? Because I remember looking at that list going, look at all the crap in our lives. I remember finding we were paying for what do you call that? XM radio.
Wow.
I don't even remember
That's
how
a
much.
splurge.
Yeah. And we never used it. I found out, I remember asking him, like, are you going to be upset? And she goes, I don't know. Are you using it? I said, no, I'm not using it. Are you using it? So things like that, we cut little things like that. So there were some magazine subscriptions we had. I had, we had, this was a fun one for me. I don't know why I got so passionate about it, because I just discovered it was cutting the cord and learning all about streaming and getting everybody else on board with it. I find it so much more enjoyable. We're spending, I think, $250 on a month on Wi-Fi, cable internet, all that. And now we're down to maybe about $75 a month for both.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Easy things like that. But the one time that we really had to discuss was we had an SUV that was roomy and comfortable, and it was a lease. And I said, look, if when this is up, this lease, we're not getting another one. And we either need to pay for it in cash, or we're going to get a smaller car that is, something that we can afford and knock off within a year. And she put her foot down at first, said, well, how are we going to be able to live without a big car? We've got the dog, we've got the kids. And I said, just let's try it out. And we did it. We're in I think it's a Ford Escape. I know it is a Ford Escape. It's a little bit older, and we're able to fit snugly, for us to go on little trips, and we figured it out, and we paid that off within 3 months, and it works fine. And now this is our the last sin we made with our money was a second lease, and it's up within a couple of months, and I'm going to actually pay for that full in cash. So those are things that were, once we able to take those steps and she can see where that money is going, we can both see, and how it's going into our investments or into our capital for our next rental. That's exciting to us now, whereas before it was just money in, money out.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So I know I want to dig just a little bit into your rental properties a little bit, because you talked about that. My first question was, when you were talking about it a second ago, you said it seemed like in the middle of this kind of crisis, you were like, so we went and bought a rental property. Like, where'd you get the money for that? How'd you kind of get started there?
So good question. So the way we did it is the how to not to do your first rental. We still had the leases. We were just getting out of debt, and we had a HELOC, and we said, let's throw on the HELOC. And that's where we put our down payment. Just to be perfectly transparent, I would not do that again. We didn't struggle paying that off. Believe it or not, I wouldn't say that it's going to work out for you. The day that I signed the tenants into this into our rental was the same day my wife called and said, I've got a full-time job. So we took her full-time job and said, we're pouring all the money in, we're paying this off in 3 months. And so it just worked out like that. And we keep the HELOC just in case, but we haven't touched it since. And we decided the next rental, so wherever we do, we're going to pay for in cash. And then we just developed a 5-year plan to say, okay, now here's how we're going to do it. We're going to pay for every rental in cash. And then once we have enough capital, we're going to start paying off each one by one in full.
By the way, I appreciate that transparency. I think it's helpful to, share, like, you got into a good situation of getting into rental properties, but recognizing that you probably didn't do it in the way that you would do it if you had it to do over again. And it worked out well that it sounds like your wife went back to work right around the same time. What has been kind of your experience with real estate investing? Like, how many properties do you have now? What have you learned from it? And kind of what's the future there?
I just have one property.
Okay.
We're looking for our second one, which we can attack right now. But we want to be very careful about it. We basically have a 5-year plan where we'd love to get 5 rentals, and we realize if we were to do this right, the same way that we're doing this rental, we could match my pension, something that I had no plans of doing, 3 years ago. So my whole goal was to find a second revenue source where once I retire, I could have a full pension and have cash flow to match that. And so in these 5 rentals, I might be able to do that completely on top of all the other investments through my Roth and my 403B, which we are planning in our long-term plan not to touch, and hopefully live off the pension and our cash flow in our rentals. Really what we're hoping to do is just live off our pension, let our cash flow just keep going, and only touch it when we really need it. But I wanted that security. I knew I'm in Illinois, and if anyone knows in Illinois, the pension system is a little bit shaky, to say the least. And so while I believe it'll be there, I don't want my wife and family to depend on a state that has not managed their funds very well and could possibly change or move the goalposts on me while I'm in retirement. So I'm taking, all precautions to try and make sure that we are financially secure and out of debt by the time I'm fully retired.
Yeah, that's a great approach, just in your recognition that something, could go a little wrong or awry with the pension, and kind of taking things into your own hands, and just some diversification in what your future income streams are also is a great approach, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Your plan for balancing multiple retirement savings tools and adding to them this other passive income source of real estate can be kind of complicated, and I think trips a lot of people up. It seems like something that's unmanageable. I think a lot of people probably relate to what you said about when you started on your 403B. You just assume that this will be there for you, and you kind of set it and forget it for the rest of your career. But to take a step back and then to start realizing I need to actively manage these, I need to build in new sources of income and plan for them appropriately. And one of the things that I like about your writing style on the blog is that you touch on some fairly technical subjects, and then you explain them in very clear ways. And I think that's really a hard thing to do in writing for people. And so, well done on that. I really like your writing style.
Thanks.
Where did you pick up on some of this knowledge and these financial acumen skills? Like what books or YouTubers, or what are your sources of information that really got you going on that aspect of it?
Yeah. So the first book that just, I'm sure you had a lot of people who say this before. The first, I just got a list of all the books and said, okay, what's the best one I can read, and overwhelmingly people were saying Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that book just, just blew me away. I just never heard anyone talk like that. I never had that kind of influence in my life. And it really just is a great book to start with the idea of money, and what it's about and how we can use it to create passive income. But it's a great book that got me excited about investing, but I don't want to give it too much credit. It's not a how-to book. It just kind of gives the overall lessons of money. And so my next book was the Dave Ramsey Total Money Makeover, which I needed at the time. It was a kick in the butt that really specifically attacked debt and why I don't need it in my life. And so then I spent a lot of time with that and really focused on the baby steps and everything else. But I couldn't get out of my passion was I just love to learn more about real estate. So I dove into the Bigger Pockets podcast and their website. I joined the website, made a whole bunch of connections with the local community near me. And I read everything that Brandon Turner wrote. I highly suggest the book on rental property investing. I think it's a long title, but that's a great book if you're interested in doing it. It's a great how-to. That's a great book. And everything by Bigger Pockets that I get my hands on, I was reading. I think when they have a list, I've read every single one of them. And they're just great stories about people who started out just like us and just realized that, house by house, you can really build up that cash flow and create a number of opportunities that I couldn't get starting this late, just pouring everything into my 403B, or a Roth. That's great. I plan to do that, but I love the idea of having the cash and the opportunities to do what I wanted with it. If I wanted to keep putting into investing, whether I want to hold on to it, whether I want to take the cash flow and invest that. So that's why I really want to have that plan of having not just rentals, but also pouring money into our 403B. My favorite book of all is, and I quote him a lot, is J.L. Collins' A Simple Path to Wealth. I loved his blog and I loved his book. A couple other favorites was I'm forgetting his name of his book, The Millionaire Teacher. Have you ever heard of it before? Where it's just a teacher in the South that teaches everyone that's a teacher how you don't have to settle for that you're not making a lot, so you don't worry about retiring early. And he sets up a system that shows how you can just invest in Vanguards, and as long as you are able to make sure that you set your limits in terms of what you spend per month and able to put it into that. And what's another one? Retire Before Mom and Dad. Love that book. So there's so many books that I've read that I often stumble going, okay, what is the name of that book? Because I usually tackle about a book a week. I love Audible, and I just listen to it and I just go right through it. And then sometimes if I really like the book, I'll go and buy it and just highlight the heck out of it.
I have so many comments on everything you just said, Tom.
I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
No, I love it. I'm a talker, so when I'll try to listen, and I'm like, I have so many things to say. Two things on that. One, I had not heard of the Millionaire Teacher book. We'll definitely put links to all of these books in the show notes because it's some great recommendations. All the other books I had heard of, I'll admit, I've actually not read a lot of books in this space. So it's something it's kind of a mindset I almost like grew up with and was just had a lot of these thoughts naturally. And then when I met Mike, like it just sort of like catapulted my focus on this in a way, and re-inspired me. I wanted to say two things. One, when you said you love Audible, I was like, do you use Libby? Have you heard of Libby? It's like you can get a lot of these, you can do a lot of these books for free without having to pay for them on Audible, which is nice.
So Maggie, that's the one that I'm almost embarrassed to say Audible because I'm so anti-subscription. But I do believe like if you really value something, you get a lot of it, then it's okay. And that one, I went through so many books that Libby was a little bit restricting in terms of what was available. that I would just get so frustrated and say, I want to read it right now. So that's why, and what I do with Audible, I guess not saying everyone to do it. I just do the every other month. And that way it costs about half of the price. You can actually go into and do every other month.
Yeah, that's nice. I agree with you on the standpoint of if you really value something, it's fine to pay for it. So I'm not knocking Audible overall. I will say my husband and I both were like avid Audibles, and you can share your account. So we'd listen to like each other's books even.
But Libby's great. You're absolutely right. Libby's awesome.
Libby is great. There are times when I want a book and I'm a little less patient. And so I have considered, just like buying some credits and kind of turning it back on.
Yeah. Waiting 30 weeks for a book to show up is not always the best.
Yeah.
Like I was just going to say, when you get that whole, 65 people are ahead of you.
A good, a good little random obscure Libby tip. And it depends I don't know if your rental property is in a different county than you're in. But in our state, you can only be a part of the public library if that's the county you live in. But if you have a rental property, you can do it. And so we have a rental property in a different county, and it seems to be a county that is less popular with the public library. So they have a less good selection, but when they do have a book, there's never a long line. And so we have both of them loaded up, and we went in and showed them like a bill from that property to get a library card in this county. And all we do is use it for digital stuff because we don't live that close to it. And so anyways, it's a nice little tip that if you have a rental property, you can have multiple Libby accounts for all the different libraries that you...
I am on that. That's a great tip.
have counties. And then, okay, so you talked about one of the books you mentioned is The Millionaire Teacher. And one of the things that I wanted to ask about actually is just the reality that you are a teacher. It is notoriously and sadly one of the lower paying types of jobs people can be at. Not incredibly low. It depends on kind of the market you're in. Mm-hmm. And I will say what I always say to my kids' teachers, like they don't pay teachers nearly enough for the work that they do. But the reality is it can be a lower paying salary. And one of the things that I think is so particularly inspiring about your story is that it reminds people and shows people that anyone can do this, right? I think sometimes people think to get to a solid financial place or even financial freedom or other things, you've got to be making a ridiculous amount of money. It's just about spending less than you make, right? And you can do that at many different levels. So I would love to just kind of hear your perspective on particularly being a teacher and how you've been able to achieve and do this. And
thank you for that. I'm always referring back to books, but I was just reading one. Again, I'm forgetting the name of it, by Morgan Housel. Am I saying it right? The principal, I forgot what the name of it. Anyways, he starts off the book. I just read it last week. I'm already forgetting. He starts off the book. I just
looked it up. The Psychology of Money.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great read if you get to that. He's great. And he starts off the book by talking about a custodian worker in I don't know, a school or something that no one really knew of anything else. And then when he retired, he was a multi-millionaire. And it just turned out he did exactly what you're talking about. The guy barely made anything, but he just socked away everything. And I'm not saying that that's what you do. You live so far below your means, you just put everything away and then just die with it. But it opened my eyes once again as a great reminder. It is not what you earn, it's what you keep and what you keep and invest. And I try to, as teachers, one thing I always say is, we're so busy saving our kids and saving the world and working all nights and doing all these things. We forget to save ourselves. And we think that, finance is for these, if I want to call them the salesmen that come in every now and then. That's a whole nother issue, and say, I'll take care of you in your 403B and you don't need to worry about it. And it just takes a little bit of effort and the willingness to sit down and learn this stuff. I mean, from your podcast to books to online, it's a wealth of knowledge that's out there that I've been able to find, as old as I am, and turn my life around. I wish that someone was able to pull me aside and teach me this when I was a younger teacher, because I know I could have lived on in my salary and found enough to put away and be much more, just have much more options by this point. If I wanted to retire early, if I wanted to travel more, if I wanted to, whatever I wanted. And I find I still will get there, even in this little amount of time, but it's out there. Teachers, you do not need to settle on just that. Well, I'm a teacher, so my life is set, that I'm going to live well below the means of other people and just count on a pension, you can be in much better control of your finances if you just take the time to learn this stuff. And on a side note, I was going to bring this up. We've been having a battle with our 403B plans within our Chicago system, in that we have very little information coming out to teachers of how it's run and how fees are and how important it is to put money away. And luckily, just for the first time in my life, we were able to get an outside fiduciary source to come in and investigate. And I've been helping with that and help organize a little bit with that. And yesterday we had the SEC come in, no vendors were allowed. And we had an online discussion with hundreds of other teachers, and where they were giving the basics like you do about what is investing, the difference with the expense ratio and fees, and answering what is the difference with a Roth IRA. And I was in the chat box answering very particular questions to the teachers who needed to know, like, how can I do a direct transfer and how do I get out of this? And so we're on the right track. It just takes a little bit of effort and knowledge and wherewithal, and you could really dramatically change your circumstances.
Yeah, that's awesome. That I don't remember if you posted that on social or if that was in a DM, but I remember you saying like there's just a lot of like lack of transparency in the fees and in how it's being run, which is interesting. Is that something that where the county or the government is actually selecting the fiduciary for that?
Without getting too far into the details, we have 3 platforms, and one of the platforms has been doing settlements across the country because of unscrupulous circumstances, and where they've been not disclosing fees and not representing themselves as well as they should have. And they've been doing a lot of payouts and things like that. And we noticed they were one of our platforms. And so to get ahead of things, I'll give it to the district. They have hired this outside source to kind of investigate themselves how it's going, and they're finding out a lot. And one of the things, when they sent out an email to all the teachers, and I'm sure the teachers just ignored it. And I got in touch with them and said, hey, this stuff is going on here. Teachers don't know what they're being charged. Teachers don't understand their investments. We're overwhelmingly being thrown into annuities when we're not even asking for them, and we have a pension, and our money, literally half of my investments were in annuities instead of in the stocks. I didn't know the difference. And so things like that, they're starting to figure out, and I believe we're on the right track to remedy that right now.
Yeah, that's so great that you've been able to use all of your, newfound knowledge over the past few years to help, get involved in that, because it's an important, it's important to have people like you that are better educated in the space that can be advocates and evangelize for what's wrong and what could be done, and new ways of doing things.
And I will say this one last thing, and I will say I've also had to, sometimes I talk too much about how bad, all the bad things that go on with these 403Bs, investment fees, that sometimes I just need to step back and realize that a lot of these teachers, and like a lot of other people, they just feel so intimidated about this stuff that if all I do is tell them about, you got to watch out for fees and you got to watch out for these advisors, they're not going to invest at all. And that I realize, like, I need to take a step back and let them know that the worst thing you can do is not invest.
I love it. A couple other questions just to kind of close things out, Tom. You've talked about this on your blog, but you said this tonight even, of just that, you got to a point where you were just in a funk and not happy and, weren't quite sure why. How have all of the changes that you've made impacted your mood, your happiness, et cetera?
Well, I will say this, that so far for the definite change, besides just the net worth and what we have in terms of liquid assets, the best part about it is that my wife and I, we're communicating more. We're setting goals together. We have real plans that are possible within the next 5 years for us to travel more, to be able to possibly, at least for me, to be retired and moving on to something that I love. It could have to do with teaching. It could have to do with outside of the classroom. I love teaching, but I'd love to just have that choice. We, with all, and what I think it comes down to mostly is just being able to have and being able to understand that I am in control for the first time in a long time. Before, I used to think that it was something outside of myself that was holding me back. It was, the district's fault. It was politics. It was and what I realized is it was really just me. I had the ability to change my circumstances. And I guess that answers it. I don't know.
Nah, I think that's perfect. I love it.
Now that you've learned all this and you've seen the benefits in your life, what are you trying to teach your kids about money? I guess both your biological children and maybe your kids in class. Maybe are you sharing that message with them too?
Yeah. So my kids have really taken an interest in finance. I try not to push it too much because, as you can see, I can just ramble on about this stuff because it's so exciting. As J.L. Collins says, if you read that book, it speaks to me because he speaks in the preface about his conversation with his daughter, who didn't give a crap about finance and all this stuff, and how he had to write this book and his blog to narrow it down to where it makes sense in her world. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to piece by piece explain to them what money can do for them, and it's not just about buying stuff. And so we've created, we've adapted I took it from it's a hybrid of Ramsey's and the Barefoot Investor. I'm forgetting his name too. And we did the glass jars, and where we have the save, we have the spend, and we have the gift jar. And they've really taken an interest with that. And we've created the app. I don't know if you guys know the app called Stockpile. It's just a custodial account to where it really helps kids learn about investing and what it means. Instead of just having in that glass, they can actually, my sons have picked, Vanguard accounts and so my other son has Apple and was it Netflix and everything else, even though I'm trying to tell them, do some, index funds and things like that instead of just buying stocks and they asked me to see it and watch it grow. It's interesting. They get to put their money in as much, they have to spread it apart to their jars, but there's always a little bit left over. And they have to explain to us at the dinner table, where they put their money in. And I noticed that they're really piling up a lot of money in the gift jar. And we talked about, what places we can give to. And so that I'm really excited about as they grow and what we're going to be doing. We set up 529 accounts. I kind of make them aware of that, but we really poured a lot of money into that and explained how that's going to help them. We've, in terms of my class, I have been in touch with some outside advocates that can help me and other teachers possibly incorporate some financial classes into our school. It takes a little bit of finagling because if you know anything about the curriculum, it's so set with time, especially now with what's going on. It's very hard to fix and to put into our schedule. So we're moving along with that. But I would love, one thing that I have in my mind is once I'm retired, I'd love to go back and not teach writing anymore. I'd love to be able to teach something about finance, maybe to high school kids.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great, I agree. That's something that would sound very fun and rewarding.
And this is coming from a guy that when I grew up, I hated math and now I love math.
Me too.
Great.
This makes sense now.
But Mike, I don't think you hated math growing up, did you?
I did.
Oh, really? I cannot imagine that about you.
I was actually terrible at math.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you had, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you've known, unlike me who discovered finance later, you had a pretty good awareness of finance since you were a kid, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Maggie likes to say I came out of the womb on a financial independence journey.
His dad retired at 42. So he grew up knowing this was an option and a path. And he literally says he started when he was 14, planning this. And
wow.
You see, I mean, if I saw that and I would be pretty inspired too, to want to learn about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think so much can be impacted by what we teach our kids and just little things that we talk about in front of our kids, and like you doing that stockpile thing to kind of teach your kids about investing and let them know that there are other paths and options, and to, you know, handle things responsibly, and just to talk about money, which I know I was just having a conversation with two of my kids in the car today about money, and, you know, they'll make these sort of flippant comments about, oh, I know you won't buy me that because you don't like to spend money. And I'm like, well, I hope you guys understand why we don't spend. I was like, we'll spend money on things that are important, but I was like, that thing is not important. And, you know, and all these things, we actually, on the way home, there was a homeless man, and the kids always want to give money when they see somebody who's homeless, which I think is amazing. And I like to encourage. Mm-hmm. And all I had was a $5 bill. And so I gave this gentleman a $5 bill. And there was something that we had put back in the store that they're wanting. And I was like, no, we don't need this. And I was like, look, guys, we just used the $5 that we didn't spend on that thing that we really didn't need to give to somebody who can now buy a meal with that money. Right. And so just even teaching them these lessons, they seem like these little moments in time, but I think kids really pick up. And so growing up where you're constantly hearing things like that and seeing things like that, I think can be incredibly powerful. Right. And it's just about nudging the direction of what money's about. I mean, when I was younger, someone asked me, what would you do with $100 or $1,000? And instinctually, it would just be like, I would buy something. And Mike, I'm proud to say, I'm sure your kids too are getting the idea like, no, I might invest it. I might do this with it. I might give it. And that can make all the difference in the world. Yeah, I like that you use the word nudge. It's a good, it's a good word. A lot of these things are small nudges, right? You're not forcing things. You're not mandating it be a certain way, but right. I have to learn to shut up sometimes. So I want to tell them what to do. Right? I feel you. Okay, so we so appreciate your time tonight, Tom, and appreciate you coming on to the podcast. And again, I've really enjoyed this discussion. I hope this is helpful and inspirational to all of our listeners and everybody out there. We like to wrap up with a Mike's Minute on the Mic, but when we have guests, we like to give it to them. So we want to ask you one hard-hitting last question. You've got 60 seconds to answer. Wow. So this is Tom's Minute on the Mic. Where do you get all of your amazingly inspirational and quippy Instagram quotes from? Oh gosh, mostly reading. If I hear some, I read at least one book a week. I either hit it on Audible or just read it. I get it through blogs. I get it through where I'll just be sitting around and I'll be writing or thinking, and I'm like, oh, it's a really good quote. Who thought of it? And then sometimes I might even say, I thought of it. It's me. So yeah, I mostly inspiration from other people and a lot of reading. I love reading blogs. I love listening to podcasts, and I'll find somebody that leads me down a rabbit hole that I'll be quoting for weeks, and then I'll move on to the next person, and pretty much that. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I love them. They're always short and sweet and very inspirational. Okay. So we'll put a link, but you guys should definitely follow What the Fi Guy on Instagram, because it's the sort of stuff people's feed should be filled with, I think, instead of, lifestyle inflation, things that are around you that are making you feel like you want things you don't need, all this stuff. Like, I love following people in this space because it's incredibly inspirational, and it's like things that are helpful to hear every day, versus a lot of things on social media can quite honestly be the exact opposite. So yeah, I'm not good with with too much with data. A lot of people are really good with, hey, I've calculated. I'm sure Mike's better at this than I am, with I know exactly how much I budgeted and the percentage. I'm just not good with that. I kind of surprise myself every now and then when I take a look. I'm more about the inspiration. That's what moves me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm more where you are, Tom, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And I especially love all the book recommendations. So we will put links in the show notes to all of those. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Well, I had fun. Thank you so much, guys, and keep doing what you're doing. We all appreciate it, and we will keep learning from you every week. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. If you have thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook, and we'll have all those links in the show notes.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.